TDX 24 tour. TDX is short for Trailblazer DX. This is the virtual TDX 24 session for using AI with MuleSoft to detect toxicity at the Oklahoma City Meetup. I'm Ryan Haig. I'm from Integration Quest, and I do MuleSoft consulting and MuleSoft education. And you can come find me on everything. I don't know about everything. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on MuleSoft community everywhere. And I love getting to know muleys. So go ahead and send me an invite. I'm happy to talk to everybody. I think this is some of the best technology that you can learn and get into. So I'm trying to help people learn it. So I'm going to show you a use case about MuleSoft today. This is I wanted to find a real hands-on practical use of artificial intelligence. And I had a project that I'm working on, a fun little project that you guys can be users of someday. It's still in stealth mode. So my project is a website where you can sign up. And one of the things you can do on the website is you can make a handle for yourself. Well, since I'm going to have it open to the public, I was a little bit concerned. I don't know how many of you have done video gaming. People don't always use nice language in video games, right? You know what I'm talking about? Put in the chat if you have seen people be a little bit offensive in their chats and in their names in video games. I don't know how many of you play video games. Anybody? But I have played some video games, and people will put cuss words. People will put racist language. People will put sexual language. You ever see that in a video game chat? People are completely unfiltered. And so I was worried about that in my website, that, you know, somebody might put a word that I think is offensive as their handle, and then everybody else on my website would have to see that, and I didn't want that. So how do you detect that? Well, if you want to write a program that can flag inappropriate content, you need some algorithm for that. And, you know, there's already a bunch of algorithms you can go find on GitHub and on Salesforce where basically the standard approach is somebody makes a giant text file full of bad words and all the different spellings of the bad words, and they just do a string match with a regular expression or something. That seems like one way to do it. But does anybody have any idea what's the problem with a bad word list approach to toxicity? Can you imagine any reason that might not be the best way to do it? No? Well, you can probably think about, like, if I was using a bad word list and you wanted to try to use a bad word, what would you do? How would you get around my bad word list and say what you want to say? Here, I'm doing one in the chat. Can you guys read that in the chat? Anybody? What does it look like I wrote? You can't read it at all. Well, sometimes I could do it a little bit less. How about this? How about that one? Can you read that? That's the trouble with bad words, is you can make text, you can make a bad word that doesn't get caught by a bad word list. So I wanted to use AI because that's great at pattern matching. So let's look at the website. You can put that website. I'm going to put it in the chat. You can scan the QR code. You can go ahead and put in whatever you want on my Toxicity website. So just for the recording, I'm going to show the website on my screen too, just so that people see what I'm talking about. This is the Toxicity website that I made with MuleSoft and some other stuff. But you can type in whatever you want here. This is a very offensive sentence, and press the little button and see what happens. It's going to call my MuleSoft API, and it's going to send the sentence off to the API, which is currently warming up. So it's a little bit slow because I didn't warm it up before the session. And when it's done, it's going to go try that text with a bunch of different AIs, and it's going to determine whether it thinks it is toxic or not. And I'm going to show you how it does that with MuleSoft. So there's a lot of different companies out there that do AI. So go ahead and you can try it yourself. I'm going to close that and do it and show you this again. So if you're watching on a recording, you can take a picture of the QR code. That's another way to get to the same website. It is mobile friendly. I made it with Quasar for the JavaScript people. If you wanted to try to make one yourself. It is not running on Heroku, but that is my plan to migrate it to Heroku. So what its job is, I wanted to make so that we could try different different sentences and see if it was offensive or not with artificial intelligence. So I think that's a kind of a fun use case. There's a link to the code. So let's look. I want to give you a little bit of algorithmic stuff. How does it actually work? Okay, what it does is it's application of natural language programming, which is a application of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a label that we put on many different algorithms. So there's there's a whole kind of library of different kinds of algorithms that all kind of get grouped under this heading, artificial intelligence, which really is just how do we get the computer to learn something that we didn't program it. Now, what is learning? Learning is being able to do something now that you couldn't do at a prior point in your life. So how can I make a program that gets better at a job as it's running, not while I'm writing it, right? So at runtime, the program has to improve its performance in some way. So natural language programming is one kind of artificial intelligence program that knows how to operate on natural language, like me talking, or like text that you type in, like an offensive sentence or a handle in my website. So there's a way to make a natural language programming type of artificial intelligence program that learns to pattern match and says, well, these are the offensive comments and these are not the offensive comments. So that's called supervised learning because you and I, programmers, label the data. We take a bunch of sentences in an Excel file. I'm going to show you that right now because this is the long version. This is the Oklahoma City Meetup version of the talk. So you guys get to see the actual code. That's not it. This one. So in here, I'll show you some of the data, right? There's, here's one of them. It's a CSV file that I started with. So one way to teach the program how to know if text is offensive or not is you take a bunch of text and you give it a label, toxic, 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 and here's the not toxic ones. That one's not toxic, right? So this is a bunch of, I'll show you where I got this data. I didn't make this data. I downloaded it, although I do have some that I made now. But really the main idea is a human being looks at the text and decides this is toxic, this is not toxic. That's called supervised learning. It's supervised because we tell the computer what the answer is, and the computer is supposed to memorize that and learn how to do it itself, right? So we start with some labeled data, and then a human can be, when we say human in the loop, that you'll hear that word a lot with supervised learning. It means you run the program, you check how it's doing, a human fixes all the mistakes and gives the new fixes back to the computer. That's the loop, that the human is in the loop, right? So you have labeled data, the computer runs for a while, makes some new predictions, and then the human decides if it likes those predictions. So if you and I think it's right or wrong, you understand we might have different opinions about what's offensive, right? So part of what it's learning is our judgment, right? So I put a bunch of labels in the data, feed it back, and then it gets better at predicting what I would say about if the data is offensive or not. Okay, that's one way to do toxicity detection. So there's really two strategies if you want to do it. Okay, you could do what I just showed you. You label the data, you train the model. It's a lot of steps, and you got to do some data work to do custom models, right? There also is this whole group of AIs online, like OpenAI and Anthropic. They did that already. They trained the model with their own judgment about what's offensive and what's not offensive. So if you want something fast, it's like a quick cloud solution for content moderation, you can go shopping and find a pre-trained model that's provided by one of these AI companies and just use it. Now that's good because it's easy and fast and not very expensive, but it does have a risk that your opinions might not match the pre-trained model's opinions. You guys, there was some news you might have read in the last few months about Google Gemini. That's one of the pre-trained models. It has some predictions about I think they had this whole thing about race, and they made a mistake, and the model was not behaving very well with race, and they got all this bad publicity about it. I think honestly, my opinion is that's probably over. It's easy to get over, to make it too big of a deal. It's a computer program. They're going to keep working on it. It's actually kind of impressive that they got it to do that. But from a technical standpoint, the model's going to do what you train it to do, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's Gemini. These are the vendors that they train their models, and we just use them out of the box. And then we may or may not be happy with what they decide to label as toxic or not toxic, right? And some are going to have different opinions than others. You can see that on the website I gave you in the chat. Like if you try different sentences, try Spanish, try German, try an Asian language that I don't know, and see if it knows what's offensive. It might not, right? But I'm going to go train it. So custom models, like if you really care that the answers are going to match your values, then you got to train it with your own labels. And that's called a custom model. And fine tuning is the process of running it iteratively, where you label the data, you retrain, you label the data, you retrain. That's how the model. So a model is data that the program uses to make a judgment. That's when you hear the word model in an artificial intelligence architecture, the model part is a neural network with a bunch of weights. It really is a big file full of numbers, maybe a database full of numbers. And those numbers, when I train a model, it modifies the numbers and I can save them, right? So if I retrain the model, the numbers are going to change and I can save the new numbers. So a model is the thing that is trained already, right? And so it can make judgments based on its past training. So the pre-trained models came from the vendors and the custom models come from us. And that's how we can make it agree with us more. So there's a few vendors out there already selling AI services, which for you and me is a really good way to get started. You can find a very low cost. They all cost a little bit when you really do it, when you use the API, but they don't cost very much, except for AWS. Watch out for AWS. But basically all the other ones I was able to get at an extremely low cost, less than $20, to try it out and learn, which is not honestly that much. When I started learning programming, I would have to go to Barnes & Noble, or back then we had another bookstore called Borders, and I would buy a $55 book every couple of months and read the whole thing. So learning does take money sometimes. Just save it up and don't buy a Starbucks every once in a while. And, if you have to, find some place to save $20 and go use one of these and give it a try. I think hands-on learning makes a big difference. So you can find just one of these and practice with just one of them. But it's not exactly like other programming because there is a little bit of a cost to use them. So the AI services, they have an API and all their APIs work a little differently. So you need some way to work with all these different APIs. Well, guess what we have? We have this cool thing called MuleSoft that lets us work with all kinds of different APIs. That's what my program does. So it gives you a way to build kind of a front-end application, what we used to call an experience API, that sits in front of these different APIs. And that experience API can be the same, even if all the back-end APIs are different. Mostly, I think people at a MuleSoft meetup already know that's what MuleSoft does. But I was at Trailblazer DX, and I was presenting to all these Salesforce folks who don't know that that's what MuleSoft does. So you and I do. And so you guys can get right into the code and give it a try, right? So we're going to go look into the code and enter comments. Has anybody been entering comments? I'm going to show you what I actually do to make this work. Put in the chat how many comments you've entered already during the talk. And if you haven't put any, go ahead and put some in, because I need your data because I'm training my models. Just one? Just one? Give it your best shot. See if you can make it go red. See if anybody can get all reds. Did anybody get all reds? You don't have to tell me what you typed. Please don't. But if you got it to go all red, I would love to hear it. Not yet. You have to say some pretty bad stuff to get it to go all red. All right, this is the, let me show you a couple things. First, I want to show you the data. So this data set I got, let's say you wanted to do this yourself. There's the two options. I'm going to go on the web that give you a way to do it. So let's just make up a new browser. I would recommend openai.com. I know you've heard about OpenAI. You have to log in and get a pro subscription to use the API. So I have a pro subscription. And then once you're in, you see I'm not on chat. Yeah, good job, VJ. He got all right. I'm not on chat.openai.com. I'm on platform.openai.com. You see I got a link. I can go chat GPT or API. So if you click on API, now you know what now the programmers are like, oh, I know what this is. No, don't put the statement, please, VJ. That's does not need. So VJ put in the chat, hey, do you want to know what got all red? No, I have a database. Don't worry, I have your statement. I don't know that you put it. I don't have your name. But what happened is it got sent through this OpenAI API here, right? So it's an API reference like you're used to, and it's actually OpenAI's API is very easy to learn. It's not a complicated API. It's a little REST thing, and it's very similar to Anthropic's. I think they're both using the same JSON. So I want to show you. There's a few ways to make it work. They actually have a guide. Where is it? Did they change the guide? They used to have a guide for what I'm doing now. Oh yeah, there it is. Moderation, right? So you can click on this moderation, and it tells you here's how you do a moderation of your text. And so you click on the moderations endpoint. It's a post request to moderations. You can do that directly with Postman, right? But I have a Mule application that does it, so I can hook it up to a website, right? So that's it. Now you can tell it's a pre-trained model because, first of all, there's no step where I put the data in. I just give it the text, and I get back all these JSON fields back that says good or bad or whatever, right? So OpenAI, they have their own content policy, and it's going to use potentially harmful as its judgment criteria. So that's a pre-trained model. A very easy one to use for a custom model is Cohere. I like Cohere's onboarding time. So for all the muleys in my community, I'm just recommending this as it won't take you very long to do Cohere. You could get in there and do it in one evening. So OpenAI is quick. Cohere is quick. Some of the other ones I did take a little bit longer to learn. So I want to recommend these as your first steps. So you just go on cohere.com. I think, how do I get to I'm going to go to my playground. I go to my playground, and you got to log into Cohere. There we go. And get in. And then they have an API too. So for Cohere, there's also, let me go back to Cohere. There is another documentation page where they tell you how to do content moderation. And the instructions are a lot different than OpenAI because it's not a pre-trained model, because instead you're training your own model. So if you scroll down here to the, where is it? Is it under text classification? No, it's, they reorganize their content moderation. Here it is, introductory guide. And it uses a classify endpoint, but what you see here as you get into the instructions is a lot more technical information about how it works because you have to train the model yourself. So there's a couple of data sets here that you can use to train the model if you want to get started. So I started with Surge AI's Toxicity data set. So Surge AI, what they do is they produce human trained data that you can use to train your own models. Okay. So that data set is on GitHub. Let me just search for it here. And I'm going to give you guys a link so you can get the data and train it yourself. They have toxicity and they have profanity, and they're not the same, right? So I'm going to do toxicity here, and I'm going to give you the link. This is the data I used for my models when I started doing this presentation. So that's in the chat. And you can see what they think, and you can relabel it if you want to. So that's the simple open source data set. They have a much bigger data set that I didn't purchase, but you have to purchase it. So that's how that works. So on Cohere, what you end up having, let me show you this dashboard. You end up creating, if you follow those instructions, this is an example. Cohere is like this. IBM is like this. Amazon is like this. So this custom model process I'm going to show you is very similar on the other vendors of the AI platforms, but they're not exactly the same. So you have to try each one of them. So I'm going to show you that you go to the fine tuning page here, you create a model. So I have a model called Surge 500 Toxic 2. You can see I created it in December. And that model was created by uploading my own data set. So if I wanted to make a new one, I would go to classify and create a classify model. And I would upload my data in step 1. So I would have to hit this training set and upload a file, a CSV file in a certain format. And then it goes to work, train, takes a while. And then it comes back and says, okay, I'm ready. Give me your data. And then it'll start classifying. So let's go to the Mule code. This is a MuleSoft meetup. So once you've got your endpoint set up, I'm going to show you. So that Cohere one I just showed you looks like this. It's a little flow. This code is linked from the Toxicity website. It's really not difficult. You make your input, right? And I just made the input here and I gave it a property for my model. So when you make yours, you would replace that property. You could use this flow or change it. And then you make an HTTP request. It's got to have a authorization header with your API key, and it comes back. And then I made a canonical data model for my website, right? So I've got it so you can type it in. It'll go through this Mule flow out to Cohere. It also goes through a different Mule flow that's very similar that goes out to OpenAI, right? In fact, it uses a scatter gather. This is how it works. And it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different AIs. I just recently got Anthropic working because I had to request permission to use their API. That you can't just sign up for the Anthropic API. You have to fill out, at least when I did it, you had to fill out an essay about, may I please use your API? I don't know if it's still like that now, but anyway, it took me a little while to get Anthropic. So yeah, that was did somebody's hand go up? I saw something happen over here. Anyway, that was how you have all the different ones I used. And then you see this extra flow at the end. I've got an async that says save results to Cosmos. This is for the fine tuning. So what I'm doing is every time the AIs are done, I take what they all said and I take the statement, but I don't have any identifying information about you. So whatever your IP address is gone. Whatever there's no cookies, because I'm not going to get good data if people's privacy is being violated. So I don't keep anything except what you typed in the box. And I put that in a database. Currently, that's in Azure Cosmos. Maybe I'm going to migrate it to Data Cloud, I think. I don't know. But right now, it's in Azure Cosmos. And all the ratings go in there so that then I can download all of the sentences and relabel them and put them back up there and retrain my models a little better. So I can show you guys that too. I don't know. This isn't an Azure meetup, so I probably won't do the Cosmos part. But we do have all that data getting saved so that we can retrain the model. The 6 different APIs we're using is IBM Watson, and that one's kind of dated. I think they might be going through an upgrade, but it still works. OpenAI is super easy to use. They're both cheap. They're both very low. Google Natural Language Moderation is what the code currently uses, and that's end of life. So I need to upgrade the code to use Google Gemini, and I'll be happy to take a pull request if somebody wants to do that for me. I love the community's help. So anybody who wants to get in there and learn Google Gemini, I need your code in this repo. It's an open source repo. You can send a pull request if you do that. Currently, it's using Google Natural Language, which is the old one, and that's a pre-trained model. And then I got Cohere in here and AWS Comprehend. I'm going to warn you about that one. It's a very good tool. It's great technology, but it doesn't charge you by usage. It charges you by when it's enabled. It's $1.80 an hour. So when I left it on for a week for Trailblazer DX, I ended up with a $250 bill. So be careful when you use AWS Comprehend. It's expensive. So I turn it back off when I'm not using it. In fact, it's not on for today's session because of that dollar cost issue. Anthropic's great. It just took a long time to get signed up, but it's real easy to learn and use and stuff. So that's the way the code works. The code is on GitHub. So I'll go back to the Toxicity site here. There it is, a link to the GitHub right there on the Toxicity site. You can fork the repo and make changes and send me pull requests. And I'd be happy to have them. Shivani Marrero is already working with me on the project. So I think it's a good demo though, to get your hands on real AI code and see what it does. You know what I mean? And learn how to use it. So, yeah, so that's the project, and you can have it and download it. It's available. Does anybody have any questions about or comments, or has anybody tried something different? You can put in the chat. Come off mute. No. Uh-oh. Somebody had to drop. No. Well, let's see. If you do, connect me on LinkedIn. See me after the session. If you're watching on the recording also, yeah, please just connect me and send me questions. Otherwise, this is just this is one of a whole series of Trailblazer DX talks that we're doing as the MuleSoft community over the next couple of weeks. So just search for hashtag TDX24 and look for the talks. And that's how you find us. So yeah, thank you very much for
Hi,
attending.
Ryan.
Yeah.